All right. Good evening, everyone. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Uh, Discussion question number one. As a consultant, uh, advise MSF on this issue. Should MSF hand over ART to the Ethiopian government, or should they continue operating ART themselves in Ethiopia? Write at least 5 bullet points outlining your strategy. So the MSF, or the Doctors Without Borders, is an organization that responds to the humanitarian crisis around the world with medical personnel and supplies. The organization, it also acts as an advocate for those who serve, providing evidence about the plight of people caught in humanitarian crisis specifically. In the 1990s, Doctors Without Borders, they started to care for people with AIDS and HIV, specifically in Ethiopia, or in the early 2000s when this first effort first began. And the ART program um, is in reference to the antiretroviral drug that is used for HIV positive people in developing countries. Um, the case highlighted some of the efforts, in particular with the Ethiopia branch of Doctors for Borders. Um, so, some of the things that I noticed that could have been, as far as points for strategies moving forward, helping out with deciding should they continue operating under themselves or under the Ethiopian government. I believe that they should still operate under their current framework, due to the fact that initially, when I was reading the case, it said that Doctors Without Borders, they were not specifically focused on AIDS and HIV. They were there for other humanitarian medical issues specifically, but due to the outcrying need for HIV and the actual diagnosis and helping with treatment in the community, they had to sort of adopt those additional roles in order to conform to the community needs. So I don't see why they should, as far as hand over their operation to like the Ethiopian government, even though um, they have their own separate program as well for the antiretroviral medication. So I think the first thing they should do is partner with the government and sort of merge those programs together, but not as far as take over complete control. And AIDS is too big of an issue within the region during this time in order to specifically just have one entity take care of that. Um, I also would recommend further data sharing so that they can also trace and help slow the spread of the disease in the area. Some of the other issues that I saw were issues was funding. So I think that they should try to partner with um, the Ethiopian government and other entities to ensure that they can meet the needs that they need to deliver the antiretroviral drug to the community. And lastly, I think that they should work on reducing the stigma related with the AIDS and HIV cases that were grossly underreported in Ethiopia. In the reading, it talks about how there was a lot of discrimination going on, and one of the biggest challenges that they were facing was discrimination. So I think that they should sort of tackle that as well. And I mean, those were pretty much my main points that I would develop for my strategy. All right, and who would like to go next?
Yeah, I agree with you, Anthony. All those points you made were definitely something I considered with the question. I kind of struggled. I was a little conflicted, I guess, with whether or not they should turn over the treatment to the government. I think the article kind of mentioned the history, kind of an unstable history of government in Ethiopia. So that might have been some of the reasoning behind them bringing it up. At least I couldn't really find another reason, but I guess that was my take on it. So so I came up with 5 points, 5 talking points or strategies. It would be MSF hiring policies must be reformed to allow locals to fill leadership positions. And I thought that was important because they mentioned how most of the people of the staff were expatriates, and they said that the reason that was because of political conflicts. They didn't want the locals getting caught in the crosshairs of political conflict if the government disagreed with them participating in it. But I thought that it was, I think it should be allowed that they should hire these locals regardless. That was just my take on it. Because because it's so expensive to bring the people from elsewhere. Number two, I put to facilitate this, we must determine what a training program would cost. I think the article and some of the statistics mentioned that money really wasn't a problem per se. So that's part of their reasoning for taking on the extra HIV and AIDS treatment as well. So if money's not a problem, then they can train locals and they should try to prepare them. They also mentioned that the main doctor, the #1 expert, is one man. You know, he's only one person, and so they need to expand their hiring practices where they can include locals. I think. Number three, invest in art and antiretroviral drugs from the pharmaceutical companies instead of just focusing on the generic uh, ways to get the drug, because like I said, because money is not an issue. They have the resources, and so they can not only stockpile generic drugs, but they should also stockpile um, the name brand drugs in case they come into short supply. So I think that should be part of the strategy. They shouldn't just focus on the generic drugs that might not be available later on. So number four was negotiate longer term contracts with experts and pay them more to stay or extend their stays. And that was just because everybody was, they said, they mentioned that most people were staying for just a year. And you need expertise, you need people to be there longer. And that's why I think the locals are important too. You gotta have the people that live there and are involved and maybe want to continue to, try to help where they are from. And number five was invest in public service messaging, like Anthony mentioned about the stigmatism associated with it. And I thought it would be important, like in the United States, we use spokespeople, like that are, like for instance, Magic Johnson, who came down with HIV. He's a spokesperson for destigmatizing HIV, and he did that in the United States. So maybe that will be that could work in Ethiopia. And so that's all I have.
I can go next. Good points, Julian and Anthony. So I thought that the MSF or Doctors Without Borders should kind of maintain control and then start working with the Ethiopian community or government just until they got it under control. Because Ethiopia, like the reading said, was one of the poorer countries and they had a lot of poverty. So just handing it over to them wouldn't really be conducive to the people of Ethiopia, because they already had like a small program and they were charging I guess the Ethiopians a small fee to go, but if it's a poverty-ridden country, a lot of them couldn't afford it. So I said they should kind of maintain control and just try to work with the Ethiopian doctors and nurses, because they didn't have enough to treat the patient for their needs initially, to try to get it under control. And also, number two, the government wasn't being truthful. Like everybody mentioned, the stigma, they lowered the numbers, and that kind of hurt. That let the rest of the world know what kind of help they actually need. But they were honest, and they let everybody know, okay, we have 10 million Ethiopians that have AIDS or HIV, and like 2 million are children. You know, a lot of the individuals and NGOs, as they say, or nonprofits or other type of organizations like Red Cross would have been more apt to be available and help, and they know how big of a pandemic it was, or how big of a crisis it was. So I think if MSF kind of maintained control, and they were able to work with their partners and their networks, like the non-field countries that help, like the U.S. helped, and a lot of other countries helped them with funding and raising things and providing staff, they would get more help. And number 1, 2, 3, I thought that they should kind of do some kind of continuing education with the staff that is there in Ethiopia, because things constantly change, and since Ethiopia is a poorer country, they probably didn't get like the newest material or newest research, and they don't know the different things that they found out about HIV and AIDS. They got it like probably 2 years later after, you know, other countries had it. So if they still had MSF involved, they did some kind of continuing education, and they got the most updated research, they can kind of they can keep a handle on it. And also, I think they should have, like Julia mentioned, like some programs for prevention, but work with the Ethiopian culture, because they did do like female genital mutilation and other different cultural things that kind of mix with blood. So if they kind of did some type of program for prevention and let them know that this is kind of how AIDS or HIV is spread, and they know it kind of goes with their culture, maybe they could kind of understand it better. Because if they're just telling them, okay, this is how it's spreading, but then not working with someone from their culture so they can explain it to, so I think it was a lot of tribes back then, like the people who they listen to, like the head tribes, okay, when you do female mutilation and it's not sterile, or the equipment, because they probably weren't going to stop the mutilation, if there wasn't sterile equipment, that could pass HIV to the next young girl that they did that ritual with, and then that next person, and then when that person was married off, and that's kind of how it spread. So if they did some type of prevention program just to kind of slow down the spread of AIDS and eventually try to prevent it while they're working with MSF, then eventually the Ethiopian government could take over after it was kind of all under control. Because while the pandemic was still at its highest, there was no way they could control it all. And that's kind of my point. Just if they kind of work together and try to gradually let them take it over instead of just handing it to them, and use all the resources of MSF until it was under control, I think would be beneficial for both organizations.
Yeah, so I kind of went the other way. I thought that they should hand over the art to the Ethiopian government, but I'll get into some of the specifics, because I don't think it's something that kind of like what Fatima was saying. It should just be a straight handover. But the first thing I have is government awareness. Previously, the Ethiopian government was unaware, and they were non-responsive to this HIV and AIDS pandemic. And this was part of the reason why the MSF was founded. Was to respond to these public health crises, emergencies, when the government wouldn't respond or they were too slow. But now that the government has contributed resources, and other governments have also contributed too, the Ethiopian government can now begin providing long-term resources towards the issue. A transition of responsibility between the MSF and the Ethiopian government would also allow for the government to establish a public awareness campaign that's aimed at the issue. Other thing I have was notated some of the MSF's inefficiencies. The MSF had a problem of not communicating amongst themselves. within the same overall organization and between the different countries. The article spoke about, I believe it was Holland that was able to implement HIV testing earlier than some of the other countries, but they didn't necessarily communicate that to the other countries. So I thought that this kind of failure to communicate didn't bode well for MSF being the most capable organization for providing relief. The Ethiopian government would most likely have a more top-down style where the communication and direction can be given and information can flow more efficiently. Then I notated the MSF turnover. The article spoke about how the MSF had difficulties keeping people within its organization for a long period of time. It spoke about difficulties getting people to commit for longer than 12 months. This leads to a lot of knowledge loss. So without a robust training system in place to ensure that transfer of knowledge, they would suffer from inefficiencies and repeated errors from having new staff take over all the time. It also spoke about how the MSFs within the country could not have, and Julie was talking about this, could not have people within the same country that were local for fear of personal backlash and attacks. Stated how if someone was being targeted, they could just send them out on a plane out of the country. So therefore, the human resources to the MSF would be limited. The Ethiopian government probably doesn't have the same kind of turnover that the MSF does. But I think a long-term transition would be best to be put in place that will allow for that transfer of responsibility. And then I have the cultural awareness and acceptability. It talked about how in Ethiopia there was a big stigma of the people coming forward for treatment and testing regarding that negative stigma of being diagnosed with HIV or AIDS. So if the government in Ethiopia were to take over, they could launch a national awareness campaign, try to change that cultural acceptability, tolerance towards accepting people. They would have bigger reach and more power to try and affect the minds of the people. And in terms of getting tested, try and get more people into the program. And so, like I said, I kind of agree with what Fatima was saying. There should be like a long-term monitoring plan. Even though I think the MSF should eventually hand the ART program over to the local government, there should be a long-term, long-range plan or partnership for working together to provide additional aid if needed. Even though it's not really the MSF's job to be there in a long-term for a long-term solution, they could still provide assistance if needed. Kind of like an information sharing or joint effort plan. For instance, how the MSF was able to put pressure on the pharmaceutical market to get some of those prices lowered. Something like that would be of a mutual benefit. So, again, kind of like Fatima was saying, I think that they should hand it over, but I think they should kind of be like a long arms reach mutual aid program in place where if they're ultimately both trying to address the same issue, that they could still work together if they had to.
I basically had the same points as all of you guys. I definitely think that they shouldn't turn it over right away, but I think overall they need to be able to hand it over so that way the country themselves can actually, and the government can actually sustain it. Because again, it's a nonprofit organization. It's not really going to be there for a long time. That's not the whole point of MSF. It's short-term relief, even though AIDS and HIV will be a long-term problem. So that's why I put that one, that they should partner with the government and then slowly start showing like their information so that way they can learn and be handed over that responsibility. I also pointed out that they need to bring in more locals into it and just kind of training, like I think Julian stated. I feel like, there's issues with trying to maintain people or experts from far away or other countries, and you need to be able to rely on the locals. And in order to do that, you need to bring the tools, the training to teach them that, so that way if they leave or when they leave, they don't take all that knowledge with them. I also said that there has to be a big issue with breaking the stigma, not only in the community, but also in the government, because I think it was Fatima that pointed out that the government was also kind of holding on to that stigma and not really releasing the full numbers, or being reluctant to. I said that they need to partner up with the government and also the community in order to practice safer cultural practices. You know, like I know you brought up the genital mutilation. Sorry, I can't say it, but yeah, that was, I feel like that's one really big issue. Um, and you know, since it is a cultural belief, I don't think that being like you shouldn't do it anymore is ever gonna work, especially coming out from like a different country. Our viewpoints are different, so being able to do it in a more safely manner, or in a way that reduces the basically the spread of AIDS and HIV, I think that would be like the best way to do it. But I do think that I don't think it's one or the other. You can't just hand it over, but you can't have it all. I don't think that MSF should have all that responsibility either. I do think it has to be more of a collaboration, a partnership, and to eventually step away. But I do think there's this issue, but with trusting the government and being able to make sure that they're going to uphold their responsibility to do these treatments for their citizens. So I think that no matter what, there should always be a partnership between that. So if they ever need more people, because I know that they mentioned in the article that there isn't enough doctors and there isn't enough nurses to address the big concerns and the amount of HIV and AIDS patients, I feel like there should always be a partnership with MSF regardless. And so no matter what, if they ever need help, they still have that, okay, well, we can go in and help for a little bit and get some more generic or name brand medication, and then help them, and then being able to leave as well. But I don't think it would be responsible just to hand it over right now, especially since they clearly stated that they don't have the capacity to do it. It wouldn't be sustainable in the long haul for the government just to take over right now.
Well, I took a definitive stance in just focusing why MSF shouldn't be handed to the Ethiopian government. I think I focused more on that than the strategies itself. So I'm just gonna go over what I have. So I put that the Ethiopian government, based on like the background that was given, it's an underdeveloped country, and I don't think that the government has the capabilities of taking over MSF. They talked about the ruling party, how it was not liked by the people, and there was like protesting and killing because of that. And so that was my first reason as to why it shouldn't be handed to the government. The second reason was because the primary reason MSF was created was because of the dissatisfaction of how government was handling the deaths, and because of the slow relief. So that was my second point. And the third point was the primary goal that MSF was established was to provide medical relief more rapidly, without allowing the national borders to deter its staff during the crisis. So that was my third point. And then my fourth point was that it might cause like political problems just handing it over to the government. For example, in the article, it mentioned that personnel testified to the president of the UN Security Council. So I feel like if it's handed to the government, people might feel threatened to speak out in regards to that. And then finally, MSF was designed to be politically, economically, and religiously independent. And I think the biggest strength it discussed in the article was their financial independence, which allowed them for rapid response. And that was basically my last point as to why it shouldn't be handed over to the Ethiopian government, just so that they'll be able to provide fast relief and aid.
All right. Yeah, I agree with what a lot of you said. I don't think that they should be taken over or by the government. Like, I mean, I just don't see a space where like Planned Parenthood or like Habitat for Humanity would be like taken over by an American government. So like, why would that be applicable in in another country, especially if there's a need for them to be there. So, well, that was a good discussion. Okay. Our next question, discussion question number 2. Imagine that you are the superintendent of a school district. The school board has voted to reopen schools during a pandemic, but parents and the teachers union are opposed to reopening. As a public leader, how do you balance the authority of the elected school board versus the will of the parents and the unions? Assuming it's not an election year, what do you do when the will of the people is no longer in line with their elected representatives? All right. So if I were superintendent, I would look and see what would work best. I would talk to the school board and see where the school board was at with it, considering that they're the ones that are like directly responsible for hiring and firing me. So I would look to their guidance. I would look to the union's guidance because they can be very powerful, especially in the political process. But if it's not an election year, I don't know if it'll matter as much. So I don't know. I would definitely look and talk to the board, though, consult with medical experts to see what the risk would be for the students going back to school. But what are you guys' thoughts on this? If you guys were the superintendent of a school district and the school board voted to reopen during a pandemic, how would you guys handle it? Especially with the opposition from the parents and the teachers union.
Well, when I read it, it just reminds me of what's going on like exactly right now.
It's a
We're
little
supposed
jumbled.
to start in like a couple of weeks. You can't hear me? No?
It's clearing up a little bit, but
Yeah, you were breaking up. Like you were really choppy there for a second.
Yeah, it's my internet. It's how about now?
it's better.
No?
It's not great, but we can hear you.
Well, let me just try to get it over with, and hopefully it clears up while I'm talking. Okay, so if I was a superintendent, I think I would do exactly what our superintendent in our school district is, kind of following what the Riverside County medical expert is saying, because right now they're doing online learning for the first part of the year until Riverside County's COVID, can you guys hear me? COVID numbers go down, and then maybe next year open up again, and then try to do some learning, but have a smaller number of kids in the classroom, because there's a lot of concerns of parents who have to go back to work and need to go back to work and don't have childcare, and a lot of kids that get a lot of meals from the school. So I understand all of that, but we don't want a lot of cases with children, and if a child passes away because they go to school, that will be a bigger issue than worried about the being upset that they missed work. They would be really upset, and they would sue the school district if their child passed away because we opened the school and they were sitting next to a child who had COVID and the parents didn't say. So I think I would talk to the board, talk to the medical experts in the county, and then have a consensus, speak to the unions, because I know the teachers, they don't want to go to school right now either, because they have children, they have families, and they don't want to be at risk. So I think in my district, if I was superintendent, everybody's kind of on the same page. Nobody really wants to open, and they do want to do distance learning just in the beginning until the numbers are kind of controlled. So I know it's not a political, an election year, and I know that they said to talk to everyone. So that's what I would kind of do. So I think for my district, we would kind of all be on the same page, because the COVID numbers out here are still kind of high. So if it was the opposite, I think I still would do the same thing. I would kind of try to persuade them to do kind of half and half online learning in the beginning, just to see what's going on. I know it's not the best, but it's better than have a lot of people sick and losing their lives or other things if it doesn't need to be like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think Fatima is on the right track there with this, because I kind of saw it a few different ways. Like, first of all, if the school board is voted to reopen the schools, I would get clarification from the school board as what exactly do they mean by that. And this is going back to what Fatima was saying. That's like, what do you mean open? Do you mean open fully, like all day, every day, all the kids in class, or we just talking that we want to have the doors open, and can we do like a hybrid kind of a thing where maybe there's half the kids go, you know, they kind of alternate. You only have a half class there. But if they said that they wanted to go full reopen, uh, again, like what Fatima was saying, as I think I would just, if my views were in opposition to the school board, I would just go get my facts together. I mean, you know, like she said, that go talk to, go get information from the county medical experts, and just kind of try to present it to them in a way to not necessarily insult them, because like Anthony said, they're still your bosses, but just try to lay it out there to say, hey, maybe some of the information out there doesn't necessarily, reflect what's best for the kids, or what maybe even some numbers out there that shows that the majority of people are not in favor of what they voted for. So maybe just try to give them some information to help guide them towards changing course. And if all else fails, if the parents and teachers are coming to you as a superintendent, there's still school board meetings that can be had. And if I had to kind of be that mediator between all the angry parents and teachers and the teachers union and the school board, I would just advise them of their right to be able to attend a school board meeting and voice their, disagreements with that, and just kind of, try to stay out of the way, but at the same time, just trying to let them know, like, hey, if you don't like it, then here's your avenue, in order to kind of let them know that, while you just, let it happen. So it's a tricky situation, but again, if I said, if it's not an election year, your just best bet is just to kind of try to guide them the right way, but let them know maybe this isn't the best long-term option for you in terms of when you are up for re-election.
Yeah, I hate this question because it's so like on point on what's going on in this world that it's kind of hard to take a step back because like it's really happening, But I genuinely feel like my personal opinion is that schools shouldn't open. I understand the benefits of food. I know there's a lot of kids that, have a lot of problems at home and their only safety is school. And I'm completely aware of that. But I think it's completely wrong to just say reinstate school full-time, open, all the same amount of students, the same amount of teacher. Of course, if the school board tells me to do it, I'm not gonna walk and be like, no, sorry, and then just walk away. I do think that you do need to take into account where you guys were talking about the county medical workers, what they're saying. We also need to talk about what CDC is saying, like what are the stats showing us? What's the data showing us? And if there is a way to do it that is safe for everyone around, then let's do it. But maybe that means that we should take that semester or half of that semester to try to figure out how we're going to do it and still do distance learning at that point while we come up with a plan, rather than to rush in, especially because, let's say this is going on right now. It's almost the end of July already. And so school will start next month, right? For kids, I think it's like August. So realistically, you don't have enough time to come up with a plan. You can say, yeah, well, we're going to reopen it, but it's not a stable plan. And that plan can cause children, adults, families, their lives, because it's not just one kid gets sick and that's better. And yeah, they have a higher, a higher rate of, I guess a lesser rate of having severe consequences of COVID, but still it's not like that child lives alone. They live with other people, and that can cause that family to get sick and other people to get sick. The teacher has children, or she is just herself, is caring for an elderly or caring for herself. It doesn't matter. It's still causing lives to be lost. So my thing would be to have the science to back it up. Obviously, I wouldn't just say, well, they're telling me we have to open up and, I'm going to falsely and blindly follow them. I'm also going to have my own opinion, do my own research, and try to get my input. I will talk to parents and have their input. And I like what you said, Keith, like we can only guide them and only empower them to make their voice heard. We can't just say, well, people are telling me this. It's not really, it doesn't say much if people don't show up also to fight for it. So I think it's like encouraging them and just letting them know their rights and what they can do. And also letting the school board know what they can do, and like, well, obviously they know what they can do, but you know, the science just behind what's everything that's going on, and everything they have to consider, really, because they will also be held accountable if something were to happen. You know, it wouldn't just be the superintendent, it would be them as well. So I don't know, I feel like this is a really hard question with everything that's going on.
Definitely. I agree with you, Melinda. Definitely. It's kind of like a gotcha question. I don't really have a professional background to know exactly what the capacity of the superintendent would be in a situation like that. But I agree with what all of you guys said. I mean, that's a kind of a situation where, yeah, it's a it's a professional decision, but it's also a personal decision. I mean, it kind of depends on, you know, it kind of depends on where your values are. You know, yes, the board hired you, but you have to remember they hired you because they nominated you, or however that process goes. But they got you there because they trusted your decision, or they trusted your ability to make a decision like that. So, like all of you guys said, it's time now, I think, to go to the board, because sometimes board members and some elected officials might not have the proper knowledge of the situation. So your job as a superintendent might be to inform them. You have to influence them, persuade them, convince them that it's not the right decision right now. And like Keith was saying about the bringing the public in, I think that would be helpful, because it will put the board kind of on the spotlight. Like, you guys have heard the parents' concerns, and you guys are still choosing to go against what the people have to say. And so it will kind of take the pressure off of you as a superintendent trying to make that decision. And also, like Keith said, getting clarification as to what the board actually means about opening the schools. You know, are we going to be doing, you know, the distance learning and all of that, or the social distancing? And so, yeah, I think that decision right there is the type of decision that can make or break your career, I imagine. You know, do you follow what the board has recommended, or do you make a cavalier decision and go against them for personal reasons, you know, when it comes to health? So I wouldn't know what to do. I think I would side on the safe side, and try to keep, I guess, at least social distance without causing too much conflict with the board. But then again, like I said, it's a personal decision. It might be the decision that you have to walk out on and say, I can't do this. You guys are going to send these kids back to school, knowing the public health crisis that's out there, and knowing I'll be putting these kids' lives in danger, and making the district and whoever else liable, like Fatima says. Basically, my take on it.
The situation kind of reminds me of a photo that I saw on, I think it was on Twitter a couple days ago, where there was this kid holding a poster that said, why should we go to school if you won't listen to the educated? I think you guys kind of covered everything from the school board meetings, and just one thing that I would follow up with in regards to the data. I think one good idea would be to look at counties that have opened school districts. If that information is available, look at counties that have opened their school district and look at counties who haven't, and see kind of the infection rate, and compare that and add that to the data. That would be a huge information that can be shared with the public and the school board. And yeah, I think that you guys covered everything. That was just my point that I wanted to add.
I've like heard of some schools that are like certain grades wouldn't be going, like the kindergarten first and second, and like third and above they would be, because they kind of like they believe they can do social distancing. But then some schools are letting everyone with no masks, and the teacher has to wear a mask and she has to be 6 feet. But I'm like, okay, so I've worked in nonprofits working with kids, and I'm like, there's no personal space, let me tell you. You can't tell a 4-year-old, 5-year-old to not hug you. They're gonna come run up and touch you and hug you and touch everything you own. So like realistically, I don't see how that 6 feet would be really possible with the kindergarten teacher, first grade teacher, you know? So it's just it's a really hard question, because I could understand that there is a need. You can't just give up on the education of children because of a pandemic, you know? And there's a lot of children who are suffering, you know, and it's also kind of unbalanced. You know, parents, some students have parents at home that are really educated that can help them understand the material, while others do not. Some people don't have the technology for it. Some of them don't have the internet. Just, you know, it's a lot. Like I said, some children are getting, there's like abuse at home, and the only time they're safe is when they're at school, and now they don't have that safety. Some kids don't have food. I know that Governor Newsom, I don't know if he's still going to do it, but I know that he did it, that when they shut down schools initially, that he had open lunch and open breakfast. So they still were allowed to come and get their breakfast, still allowed to come get their lunch. So it's just a really hard question of it. And I think it's like really hard because we're going through it. So there's no way for us to know what the right answer is yet. It's just kind of like, we'll do something and then we'll figure it out whether or not it works. But if it doesn't work, that means lives are lost. And so do you want to gamble with people's lives? It's like, but that's what public officials are doing. It's just so hard for me.
And you're right, there is no right answer to this. I don't think there's no magical like solution that anybody's going to come up with. I mean, I don't know, you guys have read, but like, you know, you hear from both sides, obviously, like you were talking about, people who, you know, kids who get abused, and kids that, you know, don't have food insecurities, you know, things like that, the digital divide and all that stuff, no access to internet, and then obviously like the health, the uh, educational benefits of kids going to school. But like you're saying, it's just how do you weigh that against, you know, the public health and all that stuff like that. And you touched on it. The younger the kids, they're not going to understand what's going on. I read some stuff that they were saying that kids who were going back to school, I think they were saying like kindergarten, first and second graders, they weren't going to require them to wear a mask. I think in part because they're not really going to know. And how do you do that? I mean, you're going to tell that kid he's got to wear a mask for, you know, 3 to 6 hours a day. You know, how do you do, you know, recess and lunch? You know, they all have to stay, you know, all separate. You know, I was reading this article saying like, you know, kids might get like one red ball to bounce during recess, and they're not allowed to pass it to another kid because, you know, it could contaminate somebody else. But there's no right answer to it, and that's what makes it so difficult.
Yeah. And I was thinking, because a couple of my friends that have kids in various states, if they're in their school, like my best friend lives in Virginia, and she's not letting her kids go back to school, even though the schools are open. She decides she's going to homeschool them. She's in the military. So I'm like, some parents are going to go that route, even though the schools are open. A lot of parents are going to keep their kids here. Like if I had to go back to work, my husband already was like, well, the kids aren't going to like any type of summer program. They're going to be at home. Because I already feel like I don't know the hygiene or stuff of other people's family. So even if they're social distancing, you don't know what other people are doing. And right now it's still so many unknowns, because we were reopened and now we're back closed. So it's kind of like, are we there at the curve where we're going to go back down, or is it just going to keep going? Okay, we're down, up, because everybody's not like wearing masks. Adults aren't wearing masks. So if they have kids in school, what if, okay, my parents don't believe the COVID's real, so they said we don't have to wear a mask, and they come to school, you know, and kids kind of do what their parents do. They're like little emulators. So if their parents don't kind of believe COVID, or they're like, well, my grandma had it and she's still okay. So, you know, it's just, there's so many different variables to it. So as a superintendent, like you're supposed to have the whole, like you're doing what the the school board wants you to, but you're also the one in charge of like the finances and the facility, the staff, principals, everything, everybody's welfare also. So if you're like cave in so quickly without even having a rebuttal or some kind of stats or anything like that, you're not doing your job either. Because if it was like something else about, okay, we're going to cut your pay, I bet you come up with some facts and some stuff of why you need to keep getting paid $150,000 a year. But when it comes to a lot of kids' lives or parents' lives or teachers' lives, I think it should be the same energy towards it. And like you said, a lot of parents would go to the school board meetings and, you know, protest and everything too, but then that kind of brings another issue. You're having all these parents come to fight why not open school, but then they're bringing, what if somebody has COVID there and everybody just goes to the meeting? They're not going to be, just like the protest, they're not 6 feet away. They're kind of all upset. They're not really thinking about COVID. They're trying to get their point across. And then you don't know how many people come out with COVID. So it's like, instead of having all the confusion, let's just kind of take a step back. We understand the schools might be losing a little bit of money, but they're still getting funded. Everybody, because the teachers are still getting paid right now. It's not like, okay, you guys are distance learning, and some teachers are teaching online and some are not. Like in our district, the kids can't be penalized if they don't have internet, they have different family conditions, so they can't fail. So the teachers put the schoolwork up there, and if they're able to do it, fine. If they're not, fine. Like, we can't penalize you because, like everybody said, everybody's household is different. Everybody has different things going on in their home. And somebody might be sick, the parents might not understand. So it's like, we can't penalize everybody because of COVID. So I think instead of trying to rush into stuff to get the fund, that's what it's about, the money, to get the funds back in the school, that the government get back up and running, we should think about everybody's health. It might be a setback for now, but in the long run, it's beneficial for everyone. So I'd rather my kids stay home until like maybe Christmas or whatever, just so I know when they go back to school, it's fine, not send them now, and then it keeps shutting down, opening 2 months, okay, we're shutting down again. Because after a while, it's like, it's gonna disrupt their learning process and their learning style and my work and other families' work. And it's just like, to me right now, it's not conducive to anyone. So I think the superintendent should just be strong, just hold it down, just close for the whole semester, and then regain once the government and everybody knows, get the handle on the virus, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like there's still too much unknown about this. You know, you come up with like a news article is different every day, talking about new symptoms, no symptoms, you know, it's airborne, it's not airborne. It's like, it's just so much stuff. So I rather, and I mind you, I'm saying this as I don't have kids, so I don't know, like, you know, my opinion isn't the same as your guys', but I'd rather have a system where kids are behind in education for 1 year, 1 semester, than have it, all these kids or all these people are losing their lives. Like, we can make up for the work. You know, there's programs, there's school programs, you can do anything. Like, there's ways to make them be able to catch up if it's only for like a semester, only a year, in comparison to all these people passing away or all these, you know, families, kids, individuals, everyone dying. You know, I know that at the OC, the county of Orange, the Orange County, teachers are like, don't want to go back because they aren't taking consideration their safety. So I don't know. It's just a hard topic. But I'm with Fatima. I think they need to shut it down. Just shut down everything, and we need to get a handle of it first, and then we'll figure out where to go. But at the same time, it's kind of like government has to do their job and be able to provide financially for the people who don't have a job anymore. We can't go to work, or their job can no longer financially, you know, provide paychecks for them, and it's not fair either. None of us asked to be in this pandemic. None of us, you know, did this, but the government needs to step up, and it's just hard when also like the funds aren't there, you know. Like, how are you gonna tell California to just completely shut down everything, and we're losing our rainy day funds as well beyond just the funds that we have? It's just hard. I think it's a horrible situation.
I just want to say, I just imagine, I think, I should say this, I think things would be better if we had a better leader in the White House. If back in March, if I'm hate to get political, but if he'd have just told everybody wear a mask, you know, and you know, if he'd have taken it serious, I think there wouldn't be so much confusion now. You know what I mean? And so because we're in a leadership class, I mean, it shows you how the bottom can fall out if you don't have good leadership.
I agree with what you're saying, but just to push back a little bit, I mean, we can't be shut down forever. You know what I mean? So at least I think that we need to have some sort of path towards normalcy moving forward, you know, like, and I would be a little uncomfortable if my government was telling me we're doomed and everything is all bad and you're pretty much going to be on your own. So I mean, I kind of see both sides of it, but from a leadership standpoint, I see that you kind of have to like take a stance at some point and say, okay, we need to get this show back on the road. But the public health is also of paramount concern as well. So I definitely agree with what you're saying. But yeah, there definitely could have been different approaches taken from the highest levels of leadership.
I don't know. I feel like it's hard because you're right. You can't shut down California. You can't just, realistically, it's not. But at the same time, what are you going to do when citizens aren't listening to your orders? Like, I think about Newsom. Newsom says you have to wear a mask. You have to wear a mask. People are not wearing masks and no one is like enforcing it, and that's the issue. The issue is, again, we live in a country that's very about my liberties, and it's my right, and it's a great thing. It is, our freedom is a great thing, but it also works against us when people are not doing the right thing for the public good, like for the overall good, just because of your one right. Like, I'm willing to sacrifice some of my right if it takes, it helps everyone else and everyone else is healthy. But that's not how people see it. It's like, it's my right and I'm going to stay with it. And that's the reason why in my head I'm like thinking you have to shut it down because people are not wearing masks. It's something different if we were all following protocols. We were washing our hands, social distancing, and wearing masks. Then realistically, probably everything could be open, and you have to change small things, but everything could be open. But the issue is that people will not listen because, again, in America, it is my right. It is my right. It's my right. You hear that on and on and on. It is your right, but at the same time, it's like your right or the greater good. Like, what do you have to do right now? Don't we also have a responsibility to society? Not only society has a responsibility to us individuals. That's not how people see it.
I agree with you, Melinda. Real quick, I just want to say that if you look at the countries that have populist presidents that did not take the virus serious, we're the number 1 and 2 countries in the world with coronavirus. The authoritarian countries, some of the East Asian countries that have authoritarian regimes, they tell people what to do and people do it and they have low cases. We have confusion, and to your point, I understand what you were saying, Anthony. The only thing about it is, at some point, you have to have unity of a nation. A nation has to come under some type of united and messaging. I think I'm sorry. What you said about getting back to everything, like after 9/11, the country was like Bush was telling everybody, go back to work, go back to school. And I think it worked for that type of situation. Because but dealing with this pandemic, everybody is, potentially deadly. It's like, if we just sat down, man, for a straight month, everybody, people were protesting. Newsom said, sit down for 2 weeks. The next day, I think they started opening up stuff. I don't know what. There's a lot of confusion. So I just think, I don't know. It's a tough situation that we're all in, and I think it's just going to take a lot of leadership to bring us out of it. It's a mess, though.
I do believe that eventually everything, will go back to normal. But I think the questions we have to ask ourselves is, how long do we want it to take? And then also, how many lives are we willing to lose in this pursuit of like normal that we see ourselves, right? Because, I'd rather sacrifice a little bit now and, I don't know, social distance, wear a mask, and just close down some things that aren't essential. And eventually everything goes back once we have a little bit more knowledge on this, more virus protection, I don't know, a vaccine, something, then have it just like, well, no, we're going to still do it this way and this way. And I don't care if they haven't figured out anything else about this. I'm going back to my normal life. well, no, like I do think our professor pointed out, eventually everyone's gonna be able to hug again and live their lives. Everyone does, no matter what pandemic it is, the world goes back to normal. But the rate that we decide that we're gonna go back to normal is up to us, because if we go right away, then now we're losing lives for our selfish reasons, because I want to get a haircut, because I want to dye my hair, or because I have my right to not wear a mask and I want to go to the beach and I don't know, I sneeze and something happens. It's just small little things like that it's hard. I know I keep saying that, and I know it doesn't make sense, but in my head is because I'm thinking about like, it's such a difficult situation that I would never want to be a leader at a time like this. And I know it sounds horrible because you have to, right? There's good times and bad times, but this is a really hard time.
Yeah, I definitely agree. All right. Our third and final discussion question. It says, our final small group discussion should be summarizing what we will take away from the Heart of Darkness Challenge. The second option of the discussion should be in discussion to how long we can help those around us participate in the challenge and what we hope to gain from those in doing so. And that question was submitted by Jennifer. So I guess I'll go first. The Heart of Darkness challenge was a little different for me. It did expose to me a lot of how I use my phone and sort of what's necessary and what's not necessary. I think that was one of the biggest takeaways from doing the challenge and creating the journals and sort of following along and tracking my usage. So one of the things that the book said is that your devices and screens should be used as a tool to help enrich your lives or further your goals or whatever you're doing, and not sort of something that you use to just passively consume random information that's not beneficial and it's time consuming, and just doesn't really have an overall purpose. So that's one thing I'd say that I've mainly taken away from the challenge, was that is, if I'm going to be in front of this like electronical device, in front of this screen, I need to make sure that it's worthwhile and I'm consuming information that's beneficial for my goals and objectives moving forward. So what about you guys?
Mine is similar. I think it's kind of knowing what you're going to use your devices for, having a purpose rather than just like, blindly going into it and spending hours in it. I also think it's taught me like to be more present, just overall in every kind of capacity, whether it's like present focusing on my homework, present with the family, just in everything. And also like it kind of points out the obvious that our phones are a tool, our technology is a tool. It doesn't have to be our whole life. We don't have to like spend the whole day in it. We don't have to succumb to that, And I feel like it's hard now with this generation because everyone is on social media. Everyone's posting every little aspect of their lives. I know in his book, he was talking about this woman that was giving birth and she was like tweeting or something about it, And I'm just like, that's crazy. But that's the reality of our life right now. Some people are like that and they have that right to do that, right? Because that's their life. But it made it more obvious to me that I don't want to be that person. I want to be present. I don't want to be the person that is like on vacation and is taking pictures and always on media the whole time. And it's like, well, are you really enjoying it? Because you're always on your phone. I don't know. It just made me realize to kind of appreciate the life I have and not feel the need to try to make it better through social media, and like, also be more empathetic to those that feel like technology is their whole life. I don't feel like that anymore. I don't feel like I need it the whole time. I do see it now as a tool that can benefit my life, but it's not the purpose of my life. That's basically the most thing I learned. And then to help other people with the challenge, I kind of realized that I am kind of forcing my fiance to do it anyways, so he has no choice. I don't know if he's happy about that, but it is what it is. But I think, my sisters appreciated it more, and it's funny because they'll still like call me and be like, when is it over? When are you doing, like, when is this over? But I've seen they call me more, we talk more, we'll FaceTime more, we'll cook together while FaceTiming. So it's like we've gotten even more close than before, but it's just kind of like showing them like this is a benefit to you as well, not just a benefit to me. So trying to kind of introduce that to them so that way they can start doing it and implementing it in their life too.
I agree with what everyone said, and I like the word tool and purpose. So I have realized that the phone is supposed to be for a certain purpose and a tool, like, not just on it, just surfing. And I think I've started to do that. It's kind of hard with the COVID, and you can't really be in contact, like face-to-face contact a lot. But, calling maybe, I don't know if you Zoom or FaceTime, if that is considered like breaking the heart of darkness challenge. But I don't think, because it's communication. So I don't know if the professor would. I think he should do like another book, Spring Part 2, Spring during COVID, so he can give us some different types of rules, so we can see how that works. But I think it would go over well before COVID, because right now I'm telling people, don't be on the internet. I told my son, he's 20, my older son, he's 20, to try to do it, and he didn't even last like an hour. He acted like he was about to die. So I was just like, whoa, because he's like, well, I don't get my tweets, and everybody texts me. So but once he has it like all day. So it didn't work for him. So I think pre-COVID, it might have worked a little better, but right now, the people in my life, they're not really for it. So I'll keep trying to push the cause for Dr. SILAR, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think you guys already talked about like the key terms. Yeah, it's a tool, man. I mean, it's just, the biggest thing I take away from it is just being aware of what you're doing, aware of how you're spending your time, aware of how much it can be a distraction, and like you guys said, it's a tool. It's meant to, obviously originally it was a phone, so it was meant to make phone calls, and somehow we've gotten way away from that, and it becomes everything else. A lot of times they say like the kids want a phone, but they don't want it for a phone. They don't want to call anybody. They want the games. They want all the apps and all that stuff like that. So, we need to be aware of what its intended use is to connect to people. But yeah, just kind of knowing where you're spending your time. I think Melinda touched on it. Like, is this helping your life or making your life worse? Are you more lonely because of it? Ironically, but or is this something that you're actually using it to be in more in touch with people? But as far as I can help around us to participate, just kind of the same thing. I like Melinda, what you said about how you and your sisters, and how you kind of like through association you forced them into that, and they got some sort of benefit out of it, that you guys now are actually doing face to face, video phone calls instead of just texting or whatever, however you guys were communicating before. So I think that's kind of like a neat little thing. I haven't been able to do that necessarily, other than when I was like strictly quarantining and stuff like that, using Zoom for some family and stuff like that. But yeah, I just think kind of just maybe trying to show them some of the benefits, and I think just kind of maybe leading by example, just like Melinda did.
So one of the things that I kind of was like the biggest thing that I learned was that there was a chapter that SILAR talked about how we're bombarded by this information that we don't necessarily need to know sometimes. So I think that was kind of the biggest takeaway that I learned. I'm subconsciously just browsing without like knowing that I'm overwhelmed with all this information. So I think that that's kind of helped me in regards, because I used to check social media all the time, and I try to minimize it now. And I feel like that's kind of helped enrich the relationships where I'm able to like catch up with friends to see what they have been doing. So I feel like in that aspect, it's kind of provided and allowed for more conversation with people and just catching up in regards to the second portion, it's so difficult to try and get like my sisters and I have a niece and nephew. They're always on their tablet. It's so difficult. Every time I come home from work, I always see them on their screen, and it's like it overwhelms me. Like it kind of depresses me because I'm over here reading this book about how we're attached to our screens, and they're doing the same exact thing. And I try to share the information, but they obviously don't listen. So I don't know how else to advise them to like do this challenge with me. But yeah, I'm trying, but it's difficult.
Yeah, I have a similar experience with it in terms of the Heart of Darkness challenge. I guess you could say some of my takeaways would be number one, just the amount of time we spend on the devices for one is, you know, when you really think about how long we spend on it, how much time and things that we could be doing other than stuck in front of our phone is really, you know, something to pay attention to for me. Also, I guess I could say, I remember a line in the book that said that people won't remember you. I was talking to my wife about giving my kids gifts or something to that effect. And I remembered the line from the book that said, people won't remember what you did for them, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And so it kind of made me question, like, wow, you know, sending this and doing that, you know, because I want people to remember, you know, but I realized, no, it's about, you know, and so that was something that I learned. So that's definitely a takeaway. It's not about the shoes, or it's not about the, you know, the jacket or the sweater that you get them. It's about how you make them feel, you know. And so, so that, and then because we're in the virus, going through the public health crisis, I've been trying to keep my boys away from the TV. So, so the so what I've been doing is just, you know, just I feel justified because of the, you know, screened in. It gives me the validation when I tell them no technology today, and they look at me mad and they don't, you know, I feel justified. I feel like, you know, this is really causing problems, because when I call them, when I want them to do something and they can't, you know, they can't comprehend and they can't do it, I attribute it to the time that they spend in front of the screen, and I have to, you know, put a stop to it, you know. And so, so there's that, and then, and also, I've been trying to focus on what my kids really like. I want to find out what they really like, because most of the time they want money for Robux, something that's like, you know, but I want to find out what they really like. And so I know my oldest son, he really likes cars. So I remember when I was a kid, we used to get model cars, you know. So and we would spend, you know, a long time trying to, you know. Anyways, because of the quarantine, I'm taking them off the technology. I started ordering them my kids model cars. So I'm focusing how they spend time differently. It's not on technology. It has to be something else. So I'm teaching them chess. I bought them the model cars, and I'm just trying to give them different avenues to do things besides turning on the TV or playing the video game. So that's basically my take on it, takeaways, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nice.
Good stuff, Julian. Good on you, man.
I need to do that for my kids. All they want is Roblox and V-Bucks for Fortnite. I've spent so much in digital currency and all those games. All right. I believe this will conclude our discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and end the recording here. As long as anyone else doesn't have any other comments or anything. All right, I'm signing this off.